Um, just a quick comment on Professor Morić, who hosts the Geopolitics and Empire podcast, and he had a recent interview with Garry Robson about the convergence of AI technology with the machine brain interface technologies, the cell phones like I'm using right now, and the surveillance, and how this integrates the communist and capitalist ideologies. And the host of the show, Morić, he kept referring to analog as an alternative to digital. And this was a discussion I had with somebody interested in my research soon after I started using the internet a lot. So back around 2005, maybe. Basically, trying to debate which was better, digital or analog. And it's what Noam Chomsky calls a false paradigm, a false framework of debate, because it's neglecting the noncommutative time frequency dynamic. So when we think of analog, we tend to think of a direct physical translation. So you have an old school record player with the album that have made a comeback of late, thankfully. But people like that, the analog sound, because you have a wider spectrum of frequencies that are recorded, versus the sampling digital rate. But it's not the range or the rate that is the issue. It's the rhythm or the phase. And so, for example, in Africa, the most prominent rhythm is 2/3, which is a syncopated rhythm. So you have, I've posted a video about that before, but you basically have, So that's like a basic example. And then I had a coworker who was a drummer. He said he was a drummer, so I asked him, well, can you do 4/3? And I demonstrated 4/3, and he said he couldn't do it, And in other words, if you listen to like traditional drumming from Ghana, it's very complex polyrhythms. And there was a great book by John Chernoff on the aesthetics of African drumming, and he was a European American or white American. I don't know if but he trained in traditional drumming of Ghana. I think it's like northern Ghana. But the key point here is that the the noncommutative, being neither analog nor digital, is actually, well, what John Chernoff was talking about was this kind of like existential void or emptiness, that it's the silence that's between the beats that opens up as a kind of emptying out of the mind and the body. And so, for example, Qigong Master Jim Nance, he spent 2 years initiating in shamanism in over a dozen countries in Africa, and he told me several of his experiences, and one of those was with the Dogon people in Mali, and there was somebody who was basically possessed by anger, by rage, and so the community did a drumming, like a drumming circle around this person, and they drummed all night long, and they drummed the rage out of the person, but the energy went into a tree, and then the tree got damaged from the anger energy, but then they had to drum the tree back to health. They had to heal the tree. And so the Chun Yi Lin, he tells a story about this too, how when he first learned healing, he was afraid of where the illness would go when he did the healing, the imbalanced energy, the extra energy. He realized it was all just extra energy, and that it could all just go back to the emptiness. And he visualizes this as light that goes back to the emptiness, like a rainbow light. And so in science, this is called a logarithmic singularity, and that's the technical definition of a rainbow. When we see, like if we look on the back of a compact disc, we see a rainbow that's literally made from the small grooves in the disc, being the different wavelengths of light as diffraction gradients. And so essentially, when we get to that frequency of light, then we eventually, science discovered the double slit experiment, where they realized that the light is being guided by something that's smaller than the particle of light, and it's something that's it turns out it's non-local. So it's actually, there's over 30 different models of quantum physics to try to explain the double slit experiment, and and then Richard Feynman would just say, well, you can't understand it. But in actuality, the David Bohm and Louis de Broglie model is based on time and frequency as being non-commutative, and this is explained by Basil J. Hiley. So essentially, what Louis de Broglie realized when he was critiquing relativity is that as a particle moves towards the speed of light, then it goes up in frequency, because the momentum is directly proportional to frequency in quantum physics. But in relativity, as the particle moves towards the speed of light, then it slows down in time, and the time gets bigger. And ever since Pythagoras in the origin of Western science, we know that time is inverse to frequency. And so Louis de Broglie, he just logically deduced that there has to be a second time from the future that then is guiding the particle in order for both relativity and quantum physics to be compatible and to both be accurate. So this is what he called the law of phase harmony as his greatest discovery. Now the problem with it is that the quantum physics supersedes the relativity, because the frequency is defined by the phase, and so you end up having a superluminal signal where the conservation of momentum is violated because the momentum is directly proportional to the frequency. And so this means that there's no rest frame, there's no invariant rest frame of observation. And whereas in relativity, you're assuming that you are observing something at the speed of light. But speed in Western science is defined as a spatial measurement, whereas frequency is defined by time, and time is not dependent on a spatial measurement. So the problem gets back to, what is time? And so we assume that in Western science, we normally assume that time is a symmetric spatial measurement. But when we do deep music training, we realize that time is not defined spatially, but it's based on what we listen to and we logically infer. And so by listening to the source of sound, it's been proven that we can hear up to 10 times faster than time frequency uncertainty. And what time frequency uncertainty is it's the conversion, it's a spatial conversion of time as an analog symmetry using a Fourier analysis. So it takes a certain amount of time to make a measurement. And so that amount of time it takes is the conversion of the signal from time to frequency and vice versa. So the more precise the frequency is, the longer time it takes to tune the frequency to that precision. Now, the problem with this assumption is that you're assuming that frequency and time are spatial measurements that are external measurements. But in terms of perception and biology, then we define space-time through the logic, a logic of internal listening. And therefore, all of our perceptions, including space-time itself, arise from this deeper dynamic of non-locality of the future guiding the past. And so Basil J. Hiley explains, before any measurement is made, there was already this non-local time from the future. And so like in biology, we rely on our what's called biophotons being our internal spirit as perception. And so it's proven now in science, when we open our eyes, there's actually biophotons that emit out of our eyes, and that all of matter is actually made of light. And so therefore, when we make a perception, when we listen to the source of the light, we're relying on the speed of light inherently as the source of perception, but we're also resonating with this superluminal signal that's a non-local resonance from the future. So this is why it's beyond analog, because it's the future and the past overlapping as a non-commutative, eternal, an eternal process of the future guiding the past. And that's why in Eastern philosophy it's called formless awareness, or direct perception. And so what happens is that reality becomes holographic, and that the frequency of the light is then the basis to transduce all the other physical perceptions of sensation and emotion and form, what are called the skandhas in Buddhism. And so this source of the perception of light then is guided by this logical inference from the future as formless awareness. So in science they call it virtual photons. The typical claim about virtual photons is that they're just a mathematical, a necessary mathematical trick to renormalize quantum physics with relativity, and that the virtual photons don't really exist because that would violate conservation of momentum. But there have been experiments recently where they have converted virtual photons into actual real photons, and these experiments, they were replicated by a physicist who's on the Nobel Physics Committee, the Nobel Prize Physics Committee, and so they're, it's well documented and corroborated. You can convert virtual photons into actual real photons, but because of this relativity symmetric mathematics, there's a bias against this empirically proven truth. They've even what's called 1/2 spin in quantum physics is precisely this time frequency non-locality. So at 1/2 spin, you exist inherently in the non-locality. So you can call it the fifth dimension, but it's not a spatial dimension. It's a non-local process of the future and the past overlapping. And so the problem is that when people train in science, starting in high school, they learn the Pythagorean theorem, and they don't realize that the square root of 2 as a irrational magnitude originated from the wrong music theory as the major second cubed, or the 9/8 cubed, which then originated from 3/2 squared and doubled, and then halved back into the same octave. So you have 9/4 that is then halved back into 9/8. So when you're squaring the perfect fifth, that's originates from Archytas, who argued that the arithmetic mean plus the harmonic mean equals the geometric mean squared, which is the arithmetic mean being the perfect fifth, and then the harmonic mean being the perfect fourth as 4/3. So you have 3/2 plus 4/3 equals the octave as 2, which is the very first logarithmic equation as irrational magnitude symmetric geometry. But that covered up the fact that the 4/3 is never a natural overtone of the root tonic as the 1. And so the 4/3 actually originates from 2/3, which is a perfect fifth in the opposite direction of time from the future as an undertone, as a subharmonic undertone. And in quantum physics, this is called a quantum beat. So you can literally have a subharmonic undertone from the future as a quantum beat. And so in meditation, this is called the Om of the universe, because you can actually hear this Om sound that's activated through deep listening, and it occurs through the heart, the right side of the heart. You'll hear this loud Om sound, but it's actually not originating from your body. It's actually you listening to the future and hearing that subharmonic of the future as a Schumann resonance, as the beat between the proton and the electron, as the this is what Andrija Puharich figured out, is that the nuclear magnetic resonance between the proton and the electron as 1/2 spin it's the phase velocity difference. So you have a reverse time subharmonic or undertone that's 8 hertz, which is the Schumann resonance of the planet of Earth. And so in terms of our brain perception, that's the REM, the waking or dream state, theta brainwaves or strong alpha brainwaves. And so essentially, when you're dreaming, when you're in a shamanic visionary, like a yoga samadhi state, then you're in a waking dream state where you have that theta deep alpha visionary perception, but it's actually based on this deeper non-commutative phase of the future and the past overlapping, as like essentially like a black hole and a white hole overlapping. And this non-commutativity or non-commutative phase, non-commutative time frequency is what Roger Penrose says is the foundation of reality, as an asymmetric time is the origin of the universe. So it's highly coherent, but it's asymmetric. And since it's asymmetric time, then there's an eternal flowing of the future and the past as the source of life in the universe. That he calls it proto-consciousness. So Roger Penrose's latest talks have been about precognition as we experience it as the truth of free will. So, for example, like Robert Sapolsky, who's a physiology professor, who I've corresponded with him, but he doesn't understand quantum physics. I mean, he understands it in the traditional, the Copenhagen sense, but not the deeper non-commutative phase sense from the de Broglie Bohm model that Basil J. Hiley explains as non-commutative. So Basil J. Hiley has published how quantum biology assumes that you have this collapse of the wave function in quantum physics that causes decoherence, but due to non-commutativity, the quantum coherence as non-locality can self-amplify into the macro scale. Because it's non-commutative, it's just a quantum algebra, and there's no need to have any wave function because the wave function assumes a symmetric spatial measurement. So once you have that non-commutative phase, once you understand that as a philosophy, then you can self-amplify the violation of the conservation of momentum into the macro scale, and you can store that energy internally in the body. But as soon as you open your eyes, it will then reverse the direction of space-time in your body, and then you're actually creating like a space-time vortex around you. The more you practice it, the stronger this space-time vortex is created, and then you're able to transform matter around you based on this deeper truth of all matter being from photons, from light. And if you read the article "Light is Heavy" by Gerard de Hooft and Martin Vandermark, they explain how there is no center of mass for the photons. So you without a center of mass, you can't have a symmetric rest frame measurement of the frequency of light, and therefore you can't have the speed of light inherently. So this is the limitation of general relativity, and then the non-commutativity takes you to what Gerard de Hooft calls the eternal black hole. So all matter as actually originates from this eternal black hole, is like the fifth dimension of the universe, but it's not a spatial dimension. It's this non-local time frequency as the basis of life on Earth and in the universe, and it's all due to a proper understanding of the logic of time and frequency, whereas the origins of Western science have tried to contain infinity into a closed materialistic spatial measurement, and that includes Christianity, because both Justin Martyr and Ignatius, the two very early Christian philosophers, were both relying on Platonic philosophy as the Hellenization of Judaism. And some people don't realize when they study Christianity, whether it's the Greek Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, or the Eastern Asian Orthodox, or whatever brand of Christianity is, it's all based on Platonic philosophy, and thus this what I call the liar of the liar, the liar of the liar being Philolaus, flipping his musical instrument around the lyre to hide the non-commutative time frequency, and then converting time and frequency into an external symmetric measurement as a magnitude, irrational magnitude ratio that originally was called a logon, and it means the unutterable, what you can't put into words, as a negative proof of infinity, but then was translated into an external irrational magnitude geometry. And so the surd used for irrational magnitude, that mathematical symbol from the Arabic mathematics, literally means unutterable. That's the Latin translation of surd, is unutterable, which comes from a logon in Greek as the opposite of the logos. And so the original meaning of logos from the book of John in the Bible is actually from this deeper Pythagorean non-commutative, what Gurdjieff called the law of three. And so the law of three is the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth and the octave as a non-commutative phase, or the yin yang and emptiness, or the three gunas in India. It's called the three gunas, but it all originates from our original human culture, the San Bushmen, from over 200,000 years ago, doing this training in what they called which is the female. It's a female energy, because you cannot see it. It's a void, like the womb. It's the cosmic womb of the universe, and that's why it's female, because most of life is actually female. That the non-local, non-duality does not rely on physical form, whereas the male we provide DNA diversity, in biology, but life originates from the formless, so that's why it's female. And so this is a deep psychological bias in primates that goes back to like chimpanzees and bonobos and humans and Homo erectus, and we have to basically reverse engineer our own evolution to realize that music is from before human language, and the meaning of music is a deeper biological reality that we can access, that then enables these like precognitive visions. So it opens up what our original culture calls re-entry into first creation, and it's also known as like the rainbow time in the Australian Aboriginal culture, which originated from the San Bushman peoples traveling around the planet like 60 to 70,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, and then they were in the Amazon rainforest over 20,000 years ago already. And there's a few tribes in the Amazon rainforest that actually look Australian, Aboriginal. They look like Aborigines from Australia, because that's where they're from, the same people that spread into Australia from Africa originally. So as human species, we're not that, we're genetically, we're much more alike, but it's this, every human culture has music, and the truth of the music is this noncommutative phase that's actually a superluminal perception that maintains life on Earth as ecology, and it relies on the lunar cycle as well as the solar cycle, and that's why humans have a menstruation synchronized with the moon, because it has to do with the pineal gland. The pineal gland resonates with the electrogravitic energy of the moon. So there's a non-local resonance with the moon as much as with the sun through the pineal gland. So when we look at the moon, it controls life on Earth through the water cycle. And so how we define time has more to do with the moon and the menstruation cycle as much as it does with the sun on Earth. And then when we neglect this lunar energy and we try to contain the time as a spatial solar measurement for farming, when we develop farming, we turn to the sun for the seasonal cycles. Whereas when we were a hunting culture, we relied on the full moon for hunting, and we relied on the psychic connection to precognitive visions for hunting, and a spiritual connection with the land and the other animals that we hunted. And so that's why there's a ecological crisis now, because with the development of farming, we cut off the relationship to the lunar energy. And this is why, like in the older religions, like in Zoroastrian religion, you have the cow jumped over the moon, because the name of God originates from bull, and Hathor was the Egyptian cow as a goddess. And what happens is that in our original human culture, they hunted the bull. The female turns into a bull when at menstruation, and that's the most powerful initiation ritual of what it means to be human. Is that the female is male internally due to this connection with the moon as a psychic healing energy. And so we lost that connection of the power of God, as the bull actually originates from the cow as the goddess, with the lunar cycle, and the female, the num energy. So the male bull has the most fat around the heart, and that fat is then transformed into the energy when we do fasting, and relying on water and fasting and dancing to then ionize our internal energy and connect back with this source of the light in the universe. So that's all I'm going to say right now. Happy Halloween, and just try to get beyond the analog and the focus on the non-commutative. Thanks.